Hello, and welcome to my workshop on gender literacy. Gender literacy is considered part of the social justice literacy within the CLAM model, or Critical Literacies Advancement Model Framework. Culturally sensitive gender literacy denotes more than acknowledging the cultural construction of gender and gender differences. It also will focus on how gender equality is maintained in culture, in the societies, and by whom. Gender literacy is crucial for allowing the facilitators and managers as adult educators and professionals to design and facilitate competent access for the learners. In this session, I will explain what gender literacy is, why is it essential in adult education studies, and how one can design workshops to help sharpen gender literacy. We will also give you detailed concrete activities you can execute in the form of assessment. First, it is necessary for me to define some notions help to create the gender literacy in its present day state. Gender literacy involves understanding gender and how it works in society. It starts with the premise that one's gender is not a given, as either a man or a woman, or even gay or straight. Such analysis of gender shows that it exists as an individual, interactional, and institutional level. People with gender sensitivity can identify such dimensions and how they sustain. The framework recognizes the need for non-traditional literacies like gender, racial, and human rights literacies to enable learners to thrive in a globalized and equitable society. This literacy also appreciates how gender works with race, class, sexual orientation, disability, and other factors, creating exclusion and inclusion structures. Gender-sensitive learners can be said to be able to go past the view of gender as is a mere concept, which is done in line with several parameters that can be seen bound to gender. This training in gender literacy is not an accumulation of knowledge vectors. It is the explicit goal of creating competencies. Gender-sensitive education allows educators to caution themselves against biases that those without the gender literacy know about. Therefore, our learning outcomes are an appropriate mix of awareness and practical learning. First, participants' prior knowledge about gender is identified as a social construct rather than a biological category. Second, they'll learn to identify the existing gender bias in assigned materials. Third, it is recognized that gender experience is intersection. Thus, participants will apply intersectional analysis to interpret the results. And last, the action plans will be offered to ensure the members can implement the gender strategies in their environments. This starts with knowledge and then builds to analysis and then goes to practical use as characterized by adult learning principles. The theoretical framework. The theory has inspired the development of gender literacy, and the means of approaching its content and teaching can be traced to different paradigms. CLAM is grounded in critical theory, which aims to dismantle symptoms of oppression. Through this model, critical literacy becomes the practical application of critical theory. To support this idea, Butler developed the concept of the performativity of gender, which points out gender is a performance and not an identity. So some context for implementation. Gender literacy training applies to various adult education and HRD environments in the workplace. Gender competent faculties facilitate the gender policy in their classrooms and provide fair results in higher learning institutions. This literacy assists educators in relating to people with diverse contexts and overcoming sexual difficulties. In the human resource development context, gender literacy training and diversity education results in better outcomes. It is worth pointing out that specific factors specifically stand to benefit from the establishment of gender literacy. Specifically in the field of healthcare, gender literacy helps to redress such existing documented inequalities in treatment. With that being said, toward the goal, gender literacy is beneficial among instructors in STEM disciplines, where gender gaps are still evident in many institutions. So the first workshop I'd like to get to today is a gender audit. So our workshop involves a gender review of educational material, which will help enhance critical faculties of gender among the learners. They must analyze real-life educational materials regarding gender sensitivity used in their specialization. It directs them to consider the figures by identifying who and what is omitted, what capacities or media, the language of gender terms or descriptors applied, and subliminal messages regarding the traits of genders. It helps to point out the presence of gender bias because what is being done, making the occurrences apparent. It is most beneficial in reaching adult learners who at the onset may disapprove what gender bias looks in modern day text. These measures are necessary since educators who undertook gender audits were more likely to choose and produce more gender balanced text in their practice. This activity should take about 30 to 45 minutes. It is better if the students are grouped in groups of 3 to 4 that will enable them to give their opinions or observations. Moving over to workshop activity number 2 in our workshop today, scenario analysis. This kind of scenario analysis activity enhances the acquisition and use of gender literacy concepts in real life situations. In each of the above scenarios that you see on the slide, there's a realistic gender-related issue in education or career settings. This can be, for example, gender differences regarding the opportunities to speak in class, gender bias in the assessment of students' performance, or giving tasks that are stereotypically associated with one gender. This will help the participants to determine gender issues related to the scenarios and the roles, assumptions, powers, and effects they hold concerning different stakeholders. This kind of scenario-based learning specifically applied to gender literacy is equally helpful as it relates the concepts learned in class to actual situations. This activity will also provide a relative space for discussion of problematic topics, as well as the development of problem-solving skills. All the scenarios outlined above on the slide are replicated from research on successful odd happenings, but you can let them develop in some of the context in the course they teach. Small group work allows for more than one opinion in problem solving. That should be done before presenting this workshop to a larger group. And finally, workshop activity number 3, action planning. The last activity differs from the previous two as it's not about awareness and dissection, but about actual action. Even when gender literacy training is well received and without specific targeted action planning to follow through, the change in practice usually does not occur. This activity commences with arriving at personal conclusions about specific gender equity issues that various participants experience where they work and study. We then guide the participants into smaller teams to discuss ideas for strategies. All the participants have action-oriented individual work plans for the short-term, mid-term, and long-term. Such a graduated approach is specifically assured of increasing implementation rates. Here, the accountability part deals with the significant challenges for the gender equity initiatives. All partners must meet and report their progress and any issues they face during the work implementation after every workshop. Even though highly developed gender literacy is critical for gender mainstreaming, very little of this kind occurs after the seminar is complete. So best practices for facilitating. That would be the next slide we discuss. So gender literacy requires effective facilitation. Concerning receptiveness and learning achievement, it was determined that the facilitation approach played a significant role in deciding receptiveness and learning in the context of gender literacy workshops. The participants must be informed that they will arrive at the facility with different levels of gender sensitivity and that it will develop from that point forward. In the case of resistance, which is quite frequent in issues related to gender literacy, workshops avoid opinion-based arguments. By being cognitive and effective, the computations accompany descriptions with feelings as assistance is processing them. Speed is of a great essence. Passing over delicate issues makes more people defensive. Instructors make other activities well organized and how effectively they can incorporate the possible questions as they interact with this transformation. So after that, we move to the evaluation plan, and it's a crucial factor. Evaluation is a crucial factor in understanding a workshop's effectiveness and improving the future workshops. Evaluation plan for this workshop includes basic and expanded forms of assessment that take place beyond the workshop. Testing common knowledge may be done with pre and post knowledge tests, whereas testing a person's power of analysis may be done using different scenario tests. Participants fill in the gender literacy assessment instrument, which strongly correlates with actual behavior regarding gender equality. Surveys done 3 months after the workshops measure whether action plans drawn during the workshop are being achieved and if the intervention barriers that the participants face. This approach will fill one of the most essential voids in gender literacy training, where most gender training lacks long-term evaluation. In this way, we can establish if the seminar contributes to creating gender equity, since that is the primary purpose of such workshops. The data will also provide the ability to update the operating structure of the trade and facilitate their operations. So how does this connect to adult education? Gender literacy, therefore, is highly resonating with adult education's generic principles and objectives. Education for adults should not only help pass information, but also change or uplift their mental attitudes and experiences for equal citizenship. Gender literacy workshops respect adult learning principles as they further participant experiences and issues they witness daily in their practice. In addition to individual learning theories, gender literacy development significantly affects adults' education in general. Teachers in this context possess an understanding of gender dimensions and can come up with lessons that deconstruct gender hurdles. Trained gender literacy was positively related to recognizing and intervening in gender bias in the organization among adult educators, thereby helps improve education's ability to achieve the purposes of adult education. So in conclusion, gender literacy is not an isolated event in one's lifetime, but a process that takes place throughout a person's lifetime. It is more development and ongoing practice than attempt to reach a goal. There are ideas and representations. The seals described here are the codes, and there's no way to become gender literate without practicing this mode of analysis daily. As seen in the list below, the following are additional learning sources that you may choose. It is rather evident that gender literacy of adult educators and human resource development practitioners shape multiple learners. In ensuring that gender equity in learning is attained, it can be argued that the ethical responsibility in eradicating sources of differences in learning is met. I urge each of you to take at least one action from today's workshop. Review your teaching materials, including gender aspects, in the following faculty post-seminar meeting, or familiarize yourself with the sources provided here. What information do you want to understand as we conclude this particular session? And I appreciate everyone's time and involvement in the gender literacy presentation. Thank you again.